Modern culture is obsessed with the tortured artist trope, and we need to talk about it. Historically, many artists have been in pain. Van Gogh, Plath, Beethoven, the list continues. And across creative fields, as a society, we have learned to revere the artist who visibly suffers and have associated anguish with evidence of seriousness. There's this idea that if your work doesn't bring about a sense of pain for you or your audience, it isn't real enough or it isn't meaningful enough to be adequately praised. And usually the debate is whether or not this is a myth and whether great artists create great art because they suffered or in spite of it. But I think the real focus should be on how this influences new creatives. Think about it this way. There are two writers who are both inspired by the ocean. A writer who's drowning cannot write a poem about drowning because they're too busy trying to survive. That's why so many people believe that mental illness is not a way to boost your creativity or push you to create a more meaningful piece of art because you're struggling, because that mental struggle actually makes the process more difficult. However, that writer can create a deep and painful piece after having that experience. Now, what about the other writer who spent their childhood loving the beach and only has seen the ocean from afar? Who then loves the sea more? Who can look at those waves and create a deep, meaningful piece of art? And modern culture will tell you the first artist can solely because they have suffered for it. And we see that as proof of depth. And so it makes a certain kind of sense that writers will continuously go back to that water again and again, chasing proof that nearly killed them. And now the second writer will follow in those footsteps because they're being convinced that creative aspiration without self-destruction isn't substantial. So the problem with the trope is that it creates this notion that wholeness is boring and that pain is the only true doorway to meaning. So now we have an entire group of people who have romanticized mental illness and constantly putting themselves in situations to improve their creative abilities, which is this terrible concept of being convinced that you are only meaningful if you're being broken open. Which begs another question: is intensity synonymous with suffering? I have so many thoughts on this. It actually inspired me to write my own book, as well as a lovely Substack article that I highly recommend that you check out. But what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the tortured artist trope? If you're a creative, do you think you get more inspired when you're feeling negative emotions? And does that encourage you to seek negative experiences in order to create more meaningfully? Let me know.